G'day Bomber fans, round 2 coming up, huge test, Essendon against Adelaide. This feels like a game that the AFL world won't really be tuning into, but for both these teams, a win just feels important for the vibes of the season. For us, we need a win to avoid going 0-2 to start the season and show everyone that we're not just competitive, but we can win against good teams. And for Adelaide, they're going to need a win to prove they're not flat track bullies like they have been in recent years. So it's a very big game for both these teams, a very important game, so there's plenty to talk about. Some more potential debutants on the way maybe for Essendon, the baby Bombers getting even younger. So yeah, let's get into it, but first the votes from the Hawthorn game. Okay, so the votes, we had the same mindset. Caldwell got 3 from you and I, grammar nerds. Merritt got 2, Dersma got 1, and there wasn't really anyone else close to those 3. That was actually the coaches' votes as well. Caldwell got 9, Merritt and Dersma got 1 each. The role player, we both struggled to split. I went with Gresham, you guys just went with Jones. So he gets the extra vote, which I think is fair. They both deserved 1. I'm not going to bother showing the tally because it's on screen. It's round 1. I will next week. And yeah, just cheers for the votes, guys. Keep them up. Okay, so Adelaide against Essendon, a matchup that us Essendon fans have enjoyed more in recent years. We have won 7 of the last 8 matches we played against the Crows. The last loss, of course, being last year, that disaster at Marvel Stadium. We won't talk about that. This year, though, the game is being played down the road at the MCG, and that definitely doesn't suit the Crows. Adelaide and the MCG, they don't get along. They're not friends. In fact, the last time Adelaide won at the MCG was in 2017. So even when they were a top team, they were still getting trounced at the G. So there's a real sense of unfamiliarity and low confidence when the Crows play on this ground. But there has been a big message this preseason. Apparently the Crows and this oval about how they can overcome their MCG woes. So if there was a time to do it, it would be now. We are fresh off a loss. We are already youngest on-field team in the competition's gotten even younger with injuries. On the flip side, the Crows are firing. They're fresh off a win, fully fit list, and we just know they're going to be good this year. So yeah, they're going to be a very hard team to beat on the weekend. Of course, we can obviously get the job done. I think it's going to be a close game. But we are the underdogs. Bookies have the Crows as the favourites to win this game. So the big question is, why is that? Why are the Crows more likely to win a game on a ground they have nightmares about? Okay, so when talking about a matchup like this, we have to start with personnel because we had a really solid preseason, not too many injuries, and in the last few weeks, things have gotten pretty bad for the club. Injuries to Wright and Guelphy didn't seem horrible at the time, but now with Langford gone and Stringer traded, we have lost all of our known goal scorers in the team. The player on our list now with the most goals who is available to play is Todd Goldstein, so we don't really have recognised goal scorers at Essendon available for this game, whereas Adelaide, they don't really have an injury list, and credit to them, they've been great this preseason. I think an important factor to both these teams' success this year is availability. I think Adelaide have an elite team on paper, but with questionable depth, and that's a similar story to us. We have questionable depth. Luckily, that depth isn't being tested right now for the Crows. They can flex their muscles while they're without injuries, but we currently have a few of our most important players out, which happens to every team. It's not an excuse, but in a season like this where we have invested in our youth, we were the youngest team in the comp last week, it means we're replacing Langford and Ridley with probably more debutants. So these two teams, two that really rely on personnel and their best players to be fit, we're very similar in that regard. So for us to be suffering injuries and Adelaide not to be, it just means on paper this week things are a little bit skewed now for me. They've got the better team, and that isn't me creating excuses. I think if anything, it's a glaring flaw with our depth, but also in a weird way, it's a little bit exciting because I don't know, now we're really being tested really roughly with these young players that we need to be there for the future. It's a bit of a baptism of fire. We're going to see more debutants this weekend, and many have been calling for debutants in recent years. Now we're getting them in waves. We're probably going to see 1 this week, maybe even 2. The Herald Sun predicted 3. So on paper, putting everything aside, looking at the predicted lineups, Adelaide's trumps ours. That's what I'm trying to say here. That they just have talent across the park, and it feels like they've done really good things to their setup too. I really like Laird back in defence because it frees up their midfield to be more dangerous with who rotates through there. It means Rankin and Saligo can run through it more. And the additions of P.O.T.Y, Cumming and Neil Bulland are beyond underrated. Those 3 took spots off the 3 worst players in the 23 before them. So, and they're all good players. So yeah, Adelaide are really cooking right now. We're not at the moment. But these two teams have always had weird games at weird times of the years. It's always hard to predict just how these matches will play out. I'm going to start by highlighting both ends of the field though. Okay, so the area of the ground that areas of the ground that I'm most worried about this week, for us, our forward line and how we score, and for them, their forward line and how they score. As I said earlier, we just don't have the personnel in the forward line to kick a high tally. I was worried about this last week, but without Langford, it's even worse. We're very reliant on young players like Caddy and Kako to be a feature now, even though they're building, or out of position guys, a bit like Draper. So we don't really have recognised goal scorers up against a team who have a pretty good defence. And then on the flip side, Adelaide's forward line is so good. There are people calling for text to be admitted it's that good. You've got Thilthorpe, who's a beast, Fogarty, who can kick a goal from anywhere, Rankin on ground level, Rochelle too. They've got goal scorers everywhere you look. We don't at the moment. So for us to win the game, we not only have to get the most out of our makeshift forward line, kick a score closer to where theirs could be, but we also have to really decrease the output of theirs. So how do we do that? How can we do both these things at once? For starters, I think the easiest way to stop their forward line firing is to not allow it to get too many chances. Adelaide are a team that can really do damage with around 50 inside 50s a game. We held the Hawks to 48 last week and conceded a pretty high score. So I think the Crows are another team who can have that vibe about them. 45 is that golden number. Anything below that and the Crows will be stressing on the lack of chances. And as you get past 50, well, they've got those opportunities to hit the scoreboard. So the important defence on Saturday will be when it is done around the ground. But also I think a big negative from the Hawks game was the lapses in D50, the one-on-one losses, the Hawks running rampant on ground level. Adelaide are a threat in the air. They're a big threat, so it makes Mackay and Reid really crucial this week, more so than last game. I trust Andy and co to handle the mess on ground level this week, but in the air, that is where we really need to be effective with our defence. We didn't really have that test because it was only really Mubby or Chol as a marking target. If anything, the issue was ground level, but this week, I'm worried about the air. And then on the flip side, I think our forward line is one that'll get eaten alive with poor entries in the air. Anything in the air will be eaten up by Keenan Murray. But they aren't actually that mobile back there. So I really like Adelaide's defence in the air, but they're not too mobile on ground level. Laird is great, but he's not someone who you can see keeping up with Gresham or Kako for a whole game. Miller is getting older. Worrell and Michaelini are more, mid to taller sized hybrid defenders. I think this is a massive week for the Smalls, for both these forward lines, because hopefully we'll be bringing the ball to ground in ours, which brings Rankin and co into it, and hopefully we'll be bringing the ball to ground in the forward line as well, in both the forward and defence. If that ball can be bubbling around inside 50, it's a win for us. Anything in the air is a win for them. For us, it's contested on ground level. We're probably stressing out Matty Nix if that's happening. So it's a bit opposite with our attacks. The Crows will be happy to test out contested marking ability in the air, whereas we'll be trying to isolate our smaller players and bring the ball to ground. Either way, though, I think inside the arcs we have more mobility and therefore can get more run on the ball than the Crows from deep in defence, which brings me to the midfield, I guess. Okay, so this is crucial. It always is with these two teams. I remember back in 2023, there was all that talk about us playing out of defence against Adelaide. Our coach said so before the game, and then we went and belted them in the guts anyway. So you can never really predict it. The coaches can't sometimes, but it is just a massive for the game and how it'll play out, this contest in the middle. Now, on paper, our midfield looked good against the Hawks. We dominated stoppages, but set of bounces were pretty worrying. We were defensively really poor, which allowed them to get some pretty easy goals from the centre. And Adelaide, they destroyed the Saints, much like Hawthorn destroyed us here. They kicked 4 goals from centre bounces. So there are big questions here, and big players we need to target a bit, you would think. And that's the thing about these two midfields. So we have Merritt and Caldwell, but after that, no one that really requires attention in stoppages. Adelaide have heaps of dangerous options. So O'Brien in the air will be hoping to give them first use in the ruck. Draper and Bryan will need to nullify his impact. Underneath them, you've got Matt Crouch, who's their anchor. He's going to be in the midfield all day and having an impact. And he's still a very capable player. All Australian, 7 clearances and a goal last week. Jordan Dawson is just elite. If we put attention into Will Day, we need more on Dawson. He's a fantastic player. Redmond could do a job there. And those three, O'Brien, Dawson and Crouch, they're the mainstays. But the beauty of throwing Laird into defence has ensured that the Crows can also have that X-Factor player in there too. Whether it is Saligo or Rankin or James Peatling. They're all really dangerous mids. They're all really busy, always crafty. And on the flip side, we have Merritt and Caldwell and Durham, I guess. And after that, everyone else is young and promising, but no one who the Crows will be stressing over. And that is both worrying and pretty awesome because it gives those younger mids a chance to really step up and prove us fans wrong for doubting them. This would be the perfect breakout game for Sartas, and it's one that he can really stand up in too. It's going to be really contest heavy. I think the team that can rip the hard balls out and get the runners going in, that's what's going to be important. I think we probably do have more run in our legs when attacking than Adelaide do, at least from defence. I think the Crows are trying to move the ball better, but I still would back us in after seeing what we saw this pre-season. I'm not as worried about their transition. I'm more worried about what they can do from the forward half of the field. But if we can cut that out by evening out at stoppages, making what promises to be a contested game a really brutal contested game instead, then it can put us on a path to winning. Because I trust our transition to be more efficient against Adelaide. They're not as effective a team at defending the ground as Hawthorn, especially on the MCG. So I think we'll have more ways to create chances this week. But again, maybe not as many ways to score when we get those chances. Yeah, look, I rate Adelaide a lot, but I do also think that they're both a team that can make others look silly like they did to St Kilda. But there's every world that they are made to look silly themselves. That's definitely the vibe you get with Adelaide, at least to start the year. We don't know how good they're going to be. And I reckon that in a weird way, there are probably more ways to win the game for Essendon, as in more avenues to winning the game. I think if we completely trounce the Crows in the midfield, they're going to really struggle to get anything done. Whereas I do think we can still transition the footy with direction and pace, even if we're low on stoppages. And if we make the game a scrappy one, make it about moments and who can rise to them, I would probably back in our midfield to rise above. I really rate Adelaide's engine room. As I've said, it's really exciting and really damaging, but they do have some blokes who can go missing a little bit. And that's why I think depth is important, and the fact that they have all those different options really helps now too, I guess. I think the Crows have better players on paper, but I'm not 100% sure that their system is good enough yet to compete on the road and at the MCG. There's a reason they've never liked the ground, so what Essendon have to do really is make that space felt, make it feel like they're playing on the MCG. We were awesome at stoppage clearances against the Hawks. We need to make those count by making the fat side as wide as possible and giving space to our runners to get out the back of stoppages and really test that zone and progress the ball forward. I think this game being on the G really suits Essendon. If it was on Marvel, I would probably back in the Crows a lot more, or even Adelaide Oval. I wouldn't even think twice if it was on Adelaide Oval, but being on the G makes it a bit tougher for the Crows. And really, it's all about what happens above the shoulders. If we play like we did against the Hawks, but with some more polish, we probably beat Adelaide. We need to be in the game from the start, though, not off to a slow one again. So we can't lose focus like we did in that first quarter, above the shoulders. And Adelaide, they're going to need to realise that they can win on this ground. They have to try not to let that hoodoo get into those noggins. It's pretty similar for both these teams. I would love this game full strength, to be honest, because I feel like we could really make a statement. But also, imagine the statement we do make if we win with our backs against the wall. This game could either get us off to a slow 0-2 start, and it might make us realise we're going to be a pretty average team, or we can get a really good win that can instill some belief into our young players. This would be a perfect game for our baby Bombers to step up and get the job done in. We're going to look at the potential changes for each team before the prediction. Leave yours in down below before we get to that. Okay, so team news. Adelaide are not going to change their team. Maybe they'll change their sub, but I doubt it. No injuries, no worries. As for us, there's a bit going on. We're going to start with Langford. So he's done his hamstring. He's out for at least a month. I think the most logical replacement there is debutant Tom Edwards. I think he'll make his debut. If not, maybe Sardell Hawley comes in on a wing and pushes Jones up forward. But I think Edwards is going to play this weekend. And for Jordan Ridley, this is a bit tougher. I'm looking at Fogarty here. I think Reid and Mackay are on Walker and Thilthorpe for the most part. But Fogarty as that third tall is now the question mark. He's only a bit taller than 190 centimetres. Some are going to point to Lewis Hayes as the inclusion, but Hayes is pretty tall. Would bringing in Hayes make us vulnerable on ground level? I think Scott might trust our medium-sized backs in Redmond and Pryor to even out against Fogarty, but I don't know. It's a 50-50. I think the changes made will be El Hawley and Edwards in for Langford and Ridley, but I wouldn't be surprised if Hayes is added to the team as well, or even someone like Jai Menzie who could come in as the sub. And speaking of sub, Gresham has to start this week. I'll be really annoyed if he doesn't start the game because we need that creativity on ground level. And also, yeah, I know there were a few players who had stinkers in round one, but I'm not a fan of swinging the axe after one game, especially in round one. I would hate to see Pryor or Hobbs get omitted. Well, actually, if Hobbs is going to play forward again, I wouldn't hate it, but yeah, we need to be getting a proper look at these guys and how they go. Okay, prediction. Yeah, look, this is a tough one. We can 100% win this game of footy. Some will say we should win this game of footy. It all depends on expectations, I guess. I hope Scott is one of the people saying we should win, because I feel like a win could really be great for morale. This game could really shape the vibes of the season for us. It could leapfrog us a little bit. I think we should be expecting to win this game. I think we can win, and we should win. But I just, going head over heart, I just rate a full-strength Adelaide more than a heart or three-quarter strength Essendon team. I just think we have key players out, and we're set to replace them with debutants. It's that depth being tested again. This is happened for years. I think there are more excuses now that we're younger, but it's not an excuse on game day. I think the Crows are just on paper the better team. And you know, the thing is, they're great on paper, but do we know if they're drilled and systematic enough to win on the road? That's the only thing making me doubt. If this was a team like Brisbane, I wouldn't think twice about it. But because it's Adelaide, we've seen them at their best and they look great. We know what they looked like at their worst in 2023 when they were on the road. So yeah, this is a really interesting game. There's so much we're going to learn from it about both teams. But yeah, I'm going to tip the Crows to win by 2 goals. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I think we can get the job done, and we should get the job done if we want to be taken seriously. But I just rate the Crows. Adelaide by 12 points. But yeah, that is that. Big game coming up. Huge test. Cheers for watching. I'll have a Best 23 video out on Friday, the team selection video, and I'll have the review out on Sunday, which means I guess the player ratings out the next day. So a few busy days of videos, so keep updated to the channel. If you want to do that, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment down below your predictions, like if you enjoyed, and go Bombers. That was in a weird order.